Hey, what's up everybody? Thank you for checking this video. If you want to see more, please leave a like and subscribe. But even if you don't, enjoy and happy coding. Welcome everybody to another episode of the Nerd Continuity, where we talk about design, development, and all the other nerdy stuff that we find online. And oh boy, I found a nerdy person online, probably the nerdiest of us all. His name is Mike. He's a self-taught developer that decided to learn development in his study, but he's gonna tell us his story in a way better way that I could say. This episode is brought to you by SkySilk. SkySilk is a cloud platform services management where you can have a free VPS online with Linux. You can use it, boot it up, put on whatever you need to do at pay $0, so it's great for development, but we're gonna talk about SkySilk later down the episode. Right now, let's focus on our amazing guest. Hello, Mike.
Hello.
How you doing?
Oh, very well, thank you. I'm a little warm. It's a bit like a sauna in here.
Yes, it's fucking hot.
By Vancouver standards, especially.
It's incredible. Yes, we are in this like little room, and I close the windows because outside there's a kids park, so it's always noisy, and it's terrible for recording. But during summer, you just like lose 20 pounds during an episode. So. That's why you're here, right? To lose
exactly.
Sweat it out.
Exactly.
Okay. Let's jump right into it. Why your story is so interesting, and why I decided to interview you, because a lot of my audience and a lot of people that listen to this podcast and they watch my videos, they almost have the same thought and the same question that you had almost a year ago. They're probably not satisfied with their own job, or they do something development related, but they are 27 plus and then almost 30. Sometimes I have almost also people 40 plus years old that they think, I want to change job, I want to learn programming. Is it too late for me? I'm too old? It's going to be too complicated. What should I do? So let's start with your background. Who are you? What did you study? What kind of work did you do before deciding to jump into development?
Okay, so originally, academically, I was kind of a humanities and languages guy. I studied history. I did some graduate research and language study in Asia. I lived in Asia for quite a while. I did some marketing work while I was over there. And then coming back to Canada, I started working in education, which is quite a nice field too, and I quite enjoy. But I guess it didn't always satisfy my nerd impulses as much as I would have liked.
Nice. Have you always been a nerd, or that started recently? In terms of computer and technology and stuff like that, you were always interested in those things?
I guess when I was younger, like many people, I toyed around a bit with some very basic technologies like HTML, Photoshop, all these sort of things, right? But definitely not a nerd in the technological sense, more a nerd in the curious sense. I like learning interesting things, right?
Nice.
And I think that definitely lends itself to tech and computer science and all of that.
Yeah. So you lived in China, you lived in Asia for a while, and then you were teaching at a language school. When that happened, do you recall the day where you decided, fuck this, I'm gonna just start coding, I'm gonna learn coding?
I think it was, I don't think there was any one day. I had this thing in the back of my mind. I mean, I guess the same kind of impulse that made me want to learn Chinese was a similar kind of impulse that would make you want to learn a programming
yeah, it's pretty
language,
similar,
right?
Programming in Chinese is really...
Well, in some ways, right? It's sort of these esoteric kind of mysterious means of communication. I don't know, it kind of drew me in. So I always had this kind of thing in the back of my mind on and off that it just struck me as kind of interesting. And then I started toying around with Code Academy.
Oh yeah.
Code Academy, learning. I think I played with Python a little bit, learned a little bit of that. Very difficult, didn't really know what the hell I was doing, but it was still, there was that spark of passion and interest still. And then, a little bit maybe bored or unsatisfied with the day jobs I was doing, so I got more and more into it, and then I started considering it seriously from a career perspective.
Nice. Interesting. So these kind of next question comes directly from one of the audience, a member of our audience, that it's really interested in your story, and it ties perfectly to the previous question. So his name is Ricardo on Twitter @RickVegaMX. And his question is, what was the trigger to switch to programming instead of anything else? Because he knows, and he has a lot of friends that they're in your situation. They are tired of their job, not satisfied, but they switch to other things. and they never actually consider programming. So why did you pick programming instead of, with your skills and your knowledge of the Chinese language, why did you actually pick programming?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think there's a couple of factors that really drew me in. One major factor was the creative potential. I love the idea that you can create your own things, right?
Nice.
No matter what you're interested in, you can explore that through app development or whatever else. You know, as the saying goes, there's an app for that, right? So,
that's
right?
true.
So anything you have any interest in, any hobby you have, that could be your focus as a developer, right? So the creative potential is really big for me. Also, I wanted something career-wise that I could kind of really throw myself into, not just like a 9-to-5 job, but something that I could throw myself into and kind of obsess over, but in a very enjoyable, satisfying way. And you know, something that I could maybe combine my own interest in a hobby sort of sense, right? So if you're doing something as a day job and you're learning great skills, that could really help you pursuing your own interests and hobbies on the side.
Yeah.
You know, you don't always have to make apps for commercial purposes,
That's
right?
true.
You could be doing things that are just interesting to you.
Yeah.
And then beyond that, just the curiosity. I mean, it's a infinitely gigantic field, right?
Yes,
Computer
it
science,
is.
tech, and all that. If you want to, you can learn, you know, to program down to the metal, and you have to learn about physics and electronic engineering. Like, it never ends, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So if you're a curious person, this is a very good field for you.
That's true.
And I would have to say the third thing that really attracted me, I could probably go on forever, but at least
Go
these are the
on.
major
Like,
factors. But the third
plenty
thing,
of time.
I think I would describe myself as a kind of a feral cat, an outside cat. I'm not a, you know, like I don't like too much structure in the sense of like a very structured kind of corporate job, very structured institutions where you have to jump through the hoops and get certain certifications and working in the office 9 to 5. It just does not jive with my personality. So I love the relative anarchy of tech.
That's a good way of putting it.
It really is a kind of beautiful anarchy in that you can figure out, what do you want to study? What are you interested in? You go and learn it, and you can probably get a job that's related to that, right?
Yeah, it's true.
Companies coming and going at the drop of a hat. It's anarchy, but it's very kind of productive anarchy, I think. And there's a lot of opportunity if you're interested in that kind of environment. And if you're interested in escaping the typical 9 to 5 corporate grind. Certainly that does exist in tech, but there's also a lot of other kinds of job opportunities.
Yeah, exactly. And as you said, like programming, even if I don't know when people started considering programming and developers like creative people. Like, always it was like, okay, the designer is the creative and then the programmer is the logical mind. It's like zero creativity. But also, to code something, you need to be creative. To solve problems, you cannot just copy paste always the same code. You need to be creative in solving problems. So I think like our environment is switching from a more regular 9 to 5 job to something that allows developers to stretch their mind and flex their muscles. And sometimes you have the peak of creativity as like 2 a.m. and in like at 10 a.m. in the morning in the office, you're just a dead brain and it's just like you cannot do anything. So
honestly, you're taking the words out of my mouth. I mean, that's what I dislike about the typical kind of 9 to 5 corporate setup. Well, you know what? Maybe I want to nap now. Maybe I'm tired now. Maybe I'm not going to be productive now, right?
That's true. Absolutely.
So maybe it would be better if I could just sleep for an hour and then get back to work on my own schedule. That to me is much more rational, right?
Absolutely. And it's also like a sort of healthier way of living, right?
Yeah.
You're not stressed constantly, hate everyone, hate your boss. So you touched upon that, and I want to just like dive deep a little bit more into that aspect of learning something. So learning programming, you said that the environment is basically infinite, like so many possibilities, just like fucking overwhelming. So
yes,
especially when you never had anything like that before you start, how did you decide where to go? You said you started with Python and then you switched and now you do like basically all JavaScript related stuff. How overwhelming was it at the beginning, and what helped you to decide which path to take?
Yeah, I think the main factors there, I guess it comes back to the question, well, what do you actually want to build, right? If you know roughly what you want to build, that can kind of dictate your language choices. Do you want to do iOS apps? Do you want to do Android apps? Do you want to do websites or whatever, right? So I guess at the time I was most interested in working on front-end web development, frankly, because I didn't really know what back-end web development was. All I really knew, like...
That's great.
Yeah,
That's
like,
a great way.
yeah, I kind of knew, I guess there's like websites, and I only knew what I could really see on the website, which is like HTML. I didn't even really understand what JavaScript was doing exactly, to be honest, yeah. So
no one knows. Like, I don't either. It's funny.
It was a mystery to me.
JavaScript doing?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I could get the CSS and the HTML part, but it was a while before I figured out the JavaScript part. But anyways, so I guess that dictated my choice. I thought, well, I was interested in like humanities kind of stuff, and I wanted to make really cool apps related to history and languages and these sort of things, and they would be very visual, so the best medium would probably be front-end web development for my interests. And then obviously if you want to do front-end web development, pretty much the one language to choose right now is JavaScript.
Yes.
May change in the future, but right now it's JavaScript, right? So that's what really got me onto JavaScript. And then once I started studying JavaScript, it opened up this whole world of, servers. What the hell is that? Express, databases, everything else, right? And then I figured out, full stack is also very interesting, and it's probably a good idea career-wise to be learning the back end too.
Yeah.
So that's how I moved into full stack web development. Then from that, you start hearing of this concept of DevOps. With Amazon Web Services and all these other things, right? And that's a whole nother world, which is also very interesting. So it's one thing leads to another, I guess.
Yes, exactly. And speaking about DevOps, this tied perfectly into the sponsor of this episode, which is SkySilk. They offer like a free VPS online where you can run Linux. You can install Ubuntu, you can install CentOS or whatever other distribution related to Linux, or you can install a fully formed CMS platform. It's just like one-click install. And they have this offer where you have an access to a free VPS forever. And when they go out of beta, you're going to get 25% off a discount of whatever VPS for the rest of your life. And you're starting using AWS. Have you ever used like DigitalOcean or Heroku or stuff like that?
Heroku is one I started with. Then I've played around with DigitalOcean a bit. But at the time, I was already getting into AWS. And that's like a whole field of study in itself. So
exactly.
I'm sort of sticking with that for now.
That's one of like the main issues with like new developers. Someone that is just starting to play with DevOps and starting to play with a server online. AWS is fucking overwhelming. There's so many things to do. Instead, you need, when you're studying and when you're starting to play around with these toys or these servers, you need something super simple that you can, with a couple of clicks, boot up, have an SSH access, and install all the things that you need to continue your study. So SkySilk.com is the answer to all your questions because it's really easy to use. They have an amazing support. They have a Discord app where they answer to all the questions that you could have. So definitely check SkySilk.com and get that free VPS offer until it lasts. That's it. That was an amazing plug from our awesome sponsor. Let's continue talking about your learning process. What was the biggest difficulty, if it was just one or multiple, like the hardest things and the biggest challenges that you probably still have or you had, but what was the thing that probably made you doubt about your ability to actually do this?
It's probably running into problems when you're building apps because you're learning in isolation if you're a self-taught person, right?
Yes.
So when you run into these bugs, when I first started learning, I found that very discouraging because I hadn't yet realized that basically is web development. The process of like that is the whole
writing
thing, right?
bugs.
Writing bugs. The whole thing is basically constantly asking and trying to answer the question, why isn't my app working, right?
Yes.
So when you first start learning, you don't realize that that's the norm and you think, oh, I'm really bad at this. No, that's just what this is. That's the whole job, right?
That's true.
I think that was the most discouraging thing, but that's really helpful too because it forces you to figure out how to solve problems in isolation, Stack Overflow, reading the docs, even at like the appropriate Reddit subreddit, there might be people who could help you for a given technology, right? Yeah,
great. And continuing on that, which resources did you find immediately? And from all the resources that you started like using online, which one are, in your opinion, like the best and the most valuable, and the one that are not like confusing or like expensive and stupid?
Yeah, so I started off, my first foray into the field was Code Academy, which is a good place to start. And then I moved on to Free Code Camp, which is a good place to start for JavaScript.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I mean, I think these guys should be paying me because I'm always plugging them. But ultimately,
yeah, we can do that.
the service or the platform that I ended up relying on, and I still do, is Udemy.com. it's paid. I mean, you're paying about, say, Canadian dollars, $15. I think US is closer to 10, 12 something for a course. But I found it extremely helpful. You can get like 20 or 30 hour courses on one topic by a pretty decent instructor. And that is huge. Actually watching them code in their own IDE so you can see how it's done, and watching them set up an environment so you can set up your own proper web development environment. That has been so helpful. And I mean, yeah, even today, like this morning before I came here, I was watching a Udemy course. So that's definitely my...
That's your Netflix.
Yeah, that's my Netflix. That's my number one recommendation. I find it extremely helpful and it's worth the investment. So I have an embarrassingly large amount of Udemy courses that I've bought. But when I think about the amount of money I've spent on those courses compared to what you'd spend on a formal education, it's nothing. True. It's absolutely nothing. It's like, you know, lunch money. So it's definitely worth the investment in my opinion.
That's true, definitely. So learning by yourself, it's 100% doable on this day and age. Like the plethora of resources that you have online, you can find for free on YouTube, or you pay just like few dollars on Udemy and you have like full access to all these amazing courses. And there are like a bunch of, I don't know how many, hundreds of thousands of websites that they offer similar things. So it's just a matter of what you want. Did you ever find yourself thinking, I would really love to have a mentor, or I should go to like a class or a course just so I can talk with the teacher? I have some question that I cannot find the answer by myself just watching these classes.
Definitely. I mean, there's been times when I have got really caught up in certain questions and I hadn't really taken the route of finding a mentor. I don't really know why, but basically I would just try to use Stack Overflow or ask Udemy. You can ask the instructor questions too, right?
Oh, yeah. Nice.
But I mean, to answer that question, that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to get an actual job, right? Because you get up to a certain point and it's like, okay, I really need some professional mentoring after this point, because I'm not, you know, I can't just keep going at it myself and hoping I'm doing it correctly or whatever else, right? You need to actually see how it's done by a professional in production and get actual feedback on your code. So that's something that I think is indispensable, at least once you get to a certain point, right?
Yeah, definitely. You need validation. You need someone that actually reviews your thing, that probably you're doing things properly, like you're doing stuff right, but there's maybe 20 different methods that you could use that are more efficient than the method that you use, and the results is identical. But it's always better to like, having someone to relate to, or just someone to speak and just like download all your ideas and just like release everything that is in your mind and speaking with someone. So even if self-teaching yourself and learning everything online is great, you still need, sometimes you should, and that's an advice that I would like to give, is like you should find someone where you could talk programming, or maybe someone that is more skilled than you and not at your same level. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck on the same questions and you're going to find the wrong answers. But someone that it could give you some like random advice, even if it doesn't give you the proper answers, just can tell you, yes, this is a proper solution, or no, you should check this other website, you should check this other class. Someone that can give you some advice. Have you ever thought of jumping on like meetups or some other like gathering of developers that are in your area, or you never attended those?
I'm very interested in that, but unfortunately my previous job, the hours conflicted with most of the meetup times in Vancouver, so it was, you know, not possible, right?
Yeah, that's true.
But actually, to go with what you were saying, I know that the advice you just gave is right, because what I find is that as I learn more and I go back and I look at my former programs or the apps I was working on before, I constantly find tons and tons of major problems that didn't stop the app from working, but they were still big problems, right? Like they were killing performance or whatever else, or security. Oh God, like security just out the window.
Oh yeah,
but you don't realize that because your app still works and you're not experienced enough to figure it out yourself until you learn more, and then you go back and look again. So quite clearly, if at the time I had someone who was more experienced, they would have pointed those problems out right away.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you're exposing your most sensitive data to anyone on the internet, or your performance is janky as hell, and there's a very, you know, clear and fixable reason for that, right?
Yeah, that's true. There's a saying that I saw a tweet about it. Someone else, like a guy tweeted, like, if you look at your code that you wrote like 6 months ago, it's probably 100% of the time it's going to be written by someone else, or it looks like it was written by someone else. And people started answering underneath, like, let's say 3 months ago, let's say 2 months ago, let's say 2 weeks ago. And it's normal, like all these, there's so much to learn every day. And even if you do the same thing over and over again, the technology evolves so fast that you still have to learn every day new things. And what you coded a month ago, now probably it's completely wrong, or you can redo it with like a new technology or like half of the line of codes, and there are like new security flaws and new performance issues and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, it's important to have someone that maybe just looks at your code and gives you some advice. When did you start using version control system? When did you start using Git and uploading your code online, publicly visible?
I think I was first introduced to the concept of Git through Free Code Camp, Free Code Camp. But then I didn't really start learning it until I was doing full stack Udemy courses where they were teaching you how to do version control as you code. So that was very valuable. And even then, because I was coding by myself, I didn't really get in the habit of doing the very sophisticated, correct methods for version control because you're not working with a team. Really, version control gets complex when you're having to work with other people, right? Yeah. So even now, that's something I'm starting to brush up on a bit more, how to properly do version control in that team context.
Yeah, you were just like committing to one master branch.
Everything.
Everything all together.
All together.
200 files, one commit.
Yes.
All together, same branch. Yes. It's okay. We like the commit message, done.
Yes.
Like, this doesn't work, period. Yeah. Great, like so useful.
And yet I had one incident during my period of study where my laptop got fried. I spilled liquid on my laptop and version control absolutely saved my life. I would have lost all of my portfolio work for the past like year if I had not been using Git. So that's a very good example of how version control can really save you.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, it's not just like to keep track of code and just like to have your history of commits and just like code collaborate. It's mostly like saves your ass with a massive backup that you should do at the end of every day. Like I know a lot of developers that they don't commit or they don't push to Git if the code is not right. Like, oh, I'm working on this feature. This feature is not done yet, so I'm not going to push it. Every day when you stop working, before going to bed, we were turning off your computer, just push to Git, push to a stupid branch that you can name it work in progress or again, hashtag broken, whatever. But push to Git because you don't know if tomorrow morning your computer is gonna start. It's gonna just turn on. So it's like, it's really sketchy. Always push to Git.
Especially if you drink beer near your computer because that can get out of hand very quickly.
Yeah, you get really handsy when when you drink beer.
Yeah.
Is like programming and beer a good combination, or programming and alcohol?
God no. In my opinion, oh God no. Programming is the ultimate insurance of sobriety because for me, even after like one beer, my work ethic drops to the point where I don't want to work on those difficult problems anymore, right? You need a lot of motivation and energy to take those really nasty problems and spend an hour or 2 hours or 2 days trying to figure them out. And for me, that does not mix with beer.
Yeah. True. I totally agree. Okay, so you had this almost year-long self-teaching process where you started like learning the basics, then you identified what you wanted to build, what you liked, and you start trying and building your portfolio. You use different technology as you improved the more you were going on, and then finally you decided to apply for some jobs, some job offers. Like, when did you decide, or when did you feel yourself that you were ready to apply for jobs? And do you still think that you're ready, or do you still have self-doubts? It's like, oh shit, it's too early.
Well, I mean, I think there's no such thing as ready unless you're like a senior developer, in my opinion, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
no one's ready. No. I can guarantee I'm not ready.
Well, yeah,
to do anything.
Exactly, right? Like, I feel like in this industry, it's like you're either an expert or you're not good enough yet, because it's,
or you create your own language, or you're not good enough.
Right. So I think it's kind of a bit of a tricky question to deal with. But for me, my rough standard was like, okay, I want to have a portfolio up on the internet that looks decent and has at least, say, going for 5 or 6 fairly complex full stack apps. That was my own goal. And those apps should be pretty original, not, ripped off of a course. Of course, you could use like some course projects as templates that you change and build on in a very significant way. I think that's reasonable enough, right? But generally I was going for that as a rough target, like 5 or 6 complex full stack apps. And also I had done a reasonable amount of study on algorithms.
Oh.
assuming that that could be on the interviews, right?
Yeah.
And I think that actually was very helpful. I didn't end up doing technical interviews that were straight algorithms, but I think it did help me answer some interview questions where I had to build things that involved, you know, doing the kind of thing you would do in an algorithm problem, maybe like manipulating data or whatever else, right? So that was the point I got to, and I felt like, you know, as I said, you're never really ready, but it was reasonable enough to start applying for junior jobs.
Nice.
And when I say junior jobs, I mean everything, because there are no junior jobs. So you just have to apply for, you know, when they're asking for 5 years experience, you still apply, whatever, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So like a lot of users that they ask me, like, I really want this job, and all the list of requirements is what they ask, but then they always have like, you have to have like a master degree in technical related fields, and you have to have like 5+ years of experience. Would you say these are like bullshit? Just like apply, it doesn't matter?
Yeah, I'd say the job advertisements are like the wish list. The company's like, oh, that would be great if we got a person with a master's degree from Harvard who has, you know, worked in Silicon Valley for 10 years and blah, 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 right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter. You just apply within reason. Like, you know, if the advertisement has nothing in it that you know how to do, okay, this might be a bit of a stretch. But if you have like 50% of the tools and the skills that they're looking for and maybe not enough experience, it's still worth throwing out an application, because frankly, throwing out an application takes 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's really a numbers game, right? The more you apply for, the larger your chance of getting an interview. So it doesn't hurt to apply widely.
Yeah, that's true.
And I ended up, maybe it's too early in the interview, but I ended up getting a position that I definitely was underqualified for based on the advertisement, right? And I think that's a pretty normal thing for a lot of people when they're getting their first jobs.
Yeah. Nice. So how was your first experience as a technical interview? Like, you never did something like that before, right? Like, never had an experience similar to this.
Yeah, the technical interviews actually, I was pretty lucky because they weren't those kind of classic interviews that you hear about where it's in person, in the office, on the whiteboard. That sounds like a nightmare to me, right? So
solve these algorithms.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, exactly. I was trying to prepare for that, but still, I did not like the prospect of doing that. Anyways, the ones that I actually did were assignments that were sent to me, and I completed them on my own computer or on a website or whatever, right? And that's, you know, much more comfortable for me. It's also, I think, much more realistic because real developers don't use whiteboards, right? You're actually solving the problem with Google half the time, and that's what you're able to do with these kind of interview style questions, right? So I found it not too bad. Some of them I did well on, some of them I didn't do well on, but much less daunting than whatever I imagined it would be.
Oh yes, it's always like, you always think about like the worst possible scenario, and then like people are super chill and it's fine. It's also funny that a lot of users, they ask me like, okay, I went and I did a technical interview and they asked me like a really complicated app or a really complicated to solve a complicated algorithm, and then I got the job. Like, am I gonna do this every day and I'm gonna start like working on just these complicated things every day? I'm not prepared for it. And like the answer is like, no. They just like, those are random exercises. Your first task is gonna fix a CSS rollover of a button. That's gonna be like your first actual job. It's just like, no, fix this table. That's it. So it's not that the complexity of the interview, it's actually what you're gonna work on like full time on every day. What did you learn during the interview? Did you learn something about yourself? Did you learn something about how to interact with people and how to talk with other developers for the first time? Especially, it was a remote interview, right?
Yeah. I guess, you know, based on my experience, from what I can tell, as Alex said, they're asking really complex questions, but not necessarily because they expect you to actually ace all of these questions. It's more like to gauge your level, right? Like, are you a senior guru, right? Yeah. So they'll ask you those kind of questions, and if you fumble over the questions, it's kind of okay because they weren't necessarily expecting you to nail them anyways, right? But at least it gives them a way to gauge roughly where you are in terms of experience and knowledge, right? So for the job I ended up getting, on some of those interview questions, I totally bumbled through some of those questions, and it was okay. It was like, yeah, I don't really know this technology that you're talking about. Or I can use technology X, but my understanding of it isn't that deep. Yeah. I'll give you one classic example. For a lot of the tools that I'd been studying, like different frameworks or whatever, I knew how to use them, but my knowledge and experience isn't so deep that I could, in a very intelligent way, describe the pros and cons of using this technology compared to another technology, right? Yeah. So that's the kind of question I fumbled over continuously in that interview. And it was kind of okay because they understood, like, that was my level. I could use it, but don't expect me to give you a really intelligent analysis of why to use it, right?
That's true. And it's mostly like, up to the interviewer ability to understand. First, like, they have your resume, so they should know your skill level. Like, if they start asking too complicated questions, they pretend they expect that perfect answer, like a senior level development. Like, fuck that. It's like they have no idea what they're doing.
I guess the one piece of advice I would give, continuing with that, is that before the interview, if you know you're going to be interviewed on a certain range of technologies, it would be good, aside from just knowing how to use them, maybe do a little bit of background reading and be able to articulate why use them and why are they better than comparable technologies. Because that would have helped me a lot, I think. On the interview.
That's good. That's a good advice. Were you interviewed by technical people or like marketing people?
The first interview was totally technical. It was 4 developers and then a fifth kind of managerial person. I don't think he's a developer. So the 4 technical interviewers were asking all programming questions, basically, right? But I think they were pretty merciful. They weren't asking,
merciful.
Yeah, they weren't trying to dig into really deep, crazy, computer science algorithm kind of questions. They were really asking questions about the actual tools that are being used on the job, which I think is pretty fair, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, who cares about other stuff? Like, you have to know and you have to feel like slightly comfortable to the things that you're gonna actually use when you start working.
Right.
So that's the important part. Okay, so you got hired. They gave you an offer and you accepted, and that happened.
Yes.
Right? Holy shit.
Yeah, I know. Like I thought I'd be more excited, but I think it's just so crazy that I don't have time to be excited, Like now I'm just like, oh God, I got to prepare to do this job.
Now you have to learn more.
Yeah. Right? Oh, don't get me wrong, I'm very happy. But it's
this is just the beginning.
Yes, that's the feeling. It's like, okay, so I've now qualified for the marathon, and now it begins. Right?
Now I have to train for the full run.
Right.
So you got your job offer like a week ago. When did you start programming JavaScript? Let's say.
Okay, I started, it's probably been over a year since I started slowly tinkering with programming in general, like with Python or whatever. It's probably been almost just exactly a year, or maybe that's not fair, like a bit over a year since I started doing JavaScript. But I've got to say, in terms of time, talking in terms of years isn't always the most helpful or meaningful for other people, because the question is hours, right? It's like studying for a year for 2 hours a week is a lot different than studying for a year for 60 hours a week, right? So that's the real issue there.
Yeah, it's true. So tell me about it. How was your schedule? How was your self-studying schedule? How many hours did you study per day? And did you ever like feel like burnout and dying almost?
Yeah. So when I was very fortunate. I was able basically to scale down my work so that when I first started playing around with programming, I could barely do anything, like only a couple hours a week, because I was so busy with my job. And then once I really committed myself to trying to make this work as a career, I started kind of scaling down a bit, and I was able to do that. Not everyone can do that, so I was quite fortunate, right? Yeah. So at first it was very limited, and I couldn't make much fast progress at like 4 or 5 hours a week. And then after that, I got my work schedule to the point where maybe I was only working like 35 hours a week or something like that, and then I could use the other waking hours to obsess over programming, so I could get my work level up to maybe 15, 20 hours a week or something, because I would just spend the whole weekend doing it. Like, I was going for it. Like, you can't, like, if you commit to doing it, you can't expect to have a life and work and learn programming. Sorry, you're just gonna have to make some temporary sacrifices,
some hard
right?
Truth here.
Yeah. So basically, I got to the point where I was maybe working 35 hours, but you got to keep in mind, working 35 hours also requires transit time and fatigue, because you're using the best hours and your energy of the day to do your day job. So it doesn't mean you can actually fruitfully use all of your other hours to program. It's not realistic, right? Unless you're just more disciplined than I am. I don't know. So anyways, maybe I could do like 15 to 20 hours a week on that kind of schedule. But even then I felt like, oh man, I'm not putting as much time into achieving this goal as I want to. I'm not getting the best of my day's energy and putting it into programming, right? So fortunately, for the last, say, 6 months or so, I was able to get my work schedule down to the point where I was only working like 20 something hours a week. And then I could really start making progress, like pouring at least 40 hours a week into programming. Wow. So then at that point, you're basically like on a full-time programming schedule.
Yeah, exactly.
And again, like no life and poor as hell, because you're working 20 something hours. And again, very fortunate. A lot of people can't necessarily make that work where you can only be doing 20 hours a week and surviving. It depends a lot on where you're living, what job you're doing, whatever, right? But long story short, I wouldn't really think of things in terms of, oh, I learned in a year or I learned in 2 years. It's more like, how many hours did you put in? That's what's going to make the difference. So you've got, when you're thinking about self-teaching or self-learning programming, you have to consider how many hours will I be able to commit, and that's going to determine how long this path is going to be.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Absolutely. And just to be clear, you were by yourself. Like you were working, pay your rent, and like living by yourself. You weren't living with your parents. No one was paying for everything.
Exactly.
For anything.
Yeah. So poor as hell, like just paying the rent and like being really poor for a year and like scraping by to pay the bills. But for me, it was a worthwhile investment because when you think about it, I got a job that most computer science graduates would be happy to get.
Yeah.
And what did they invest, right? 4 years of opportunity cost and God knows how much in tuition without the ability to work. So how are they paying for their living expenses? So for me, that year of programming was a sacrifice, but it was a pretty good deal, really, to get the kind of job that I got. I think it was very worthwhile.
Yeah.
So no complaints. And frankly, it shouldn't feel like too much of a sacrifice if you like the field enough. And it didn't feel like, I felt like it was, obviously frustrating and difficult much of the time, but overall interesting and satisfying. And if you don't feel that way, it's probably not worth your while doing it, because you're going to have to really be investing a lot of time to get up to the point where you're actually competent, right?
Yeah, exactly. And thinking that you have to do that pretty much every day for the rest of your life.
Right.
If you don't love it to the point that I just don't want to sleep, I want to achieve this goal and just want to do it. Fuck fuck dinner. I don't care. I'm gonna skip breakfast today and just do it.
Especially as a self-taught person, right? You got to realize an employer is looking at 10 computer science graduates. Why the hell would they pick you, right? It better be because you've pushed yourself to be very competent in the tools that the company's actually using.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's not going to happen. And then also, in order to compete with those guys who hopefully have a very solid background in the science of computers, you're going to have to put in a lot of time when you're not working, your own time, right? So even once I get this developer job, I'm still not going to have a life for a while, which is fine because I kind of enjoy this life. I like learning this stuff, right? But that's the mindset that you have to have. You have to be willing to put in a reasonable sacrifice to catch yourself up to people who have a much more formal background.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah, it's funny that Sabrina, my girlfriend, like she doesn't really understand this, which is funny. Like she knows that I love doing this thing, but she doesn't understand that after we go out with our friends and like we go out for dinner, when we come back, it's like 11 p.m. and she goes to bed. I'm like, I'm going to spend a couple of hours at the computer just like coding or learning new stuff, even if tomorrow morning I'm going to wake up at 8 and code the entire day.
Right.
But it's something that you have to do, especially in our field. You have to constantly, there's never a point where, okay, I'm done. I'm arrived. I will do this for the rest of my life. It's not carpentry or like auto mechanic. It's something that you constantly have to improve your skills and constantly learn new stuff. Otherwise you're behind. And yeah, there are, as you said, so many other people that can replace you. So you have to have something more compared to the competition. We already touched upon all the advice. Like throughout this interview, you gave a lot of really good advice for people that they want to do the same thing that you did.
Well, yeah, let's see if I still have my job in 2 weeks, and we'll determine if it's good advice at that point.
We're gonna interview you again. It's like, no, don't do that.
Yeah. Oh, guys, I'm sorry.
That was so wrong. But if you could, sometimes I ask this question, which it's a really stupid question, but if you could meet yourself a year ago, a couple of years ago, when you just started thinking about this thing, like what are the suggestions you would give to yourself, and what are the same suggestions that you would give to someone that it's in your situation like a year ago, someone that has a job and is not satisfied, wants to change and wants to learn programming and is not super young?
My advice to that person would be, 1, it's entirely doable. It is doable. 2, it is not easy. So yeah, you can do it, but you better be pretty obsessed. You better be, like a semi-obsessive person, or else it's probably not worth it and it may not work out for you, right? So entirely doable, but it's not a walk in the park. And you have to think about it realistically in financial terms. And a lot of it comes down to time, effort, and money. Yeah. Do you have the time? Do you have the money to support yourself while learning? And do you have the passion to push yourself and, allow you to apply the necessary effort, right? So for me, those are the 3 big factors. If you have those 3 things and you have an average, adult intelligence level, I'm not, seriously, I'm not an expert on learning disabilities or whatever, but I think for a normal person who has those 3 factors in place, it's entirely doable. But you have to be kind of obsessive about it. Yeah. And you probably need to have some kind of passion to push you through. Hopefully you're excited about building your own projects, because really that's something that will help you once you're even in the job, I think, working on your own projects on the side, so that it doesn't feel like a chore.
Yeah.
You know, you actually want to be a crazy inventor and build some crazy robotics or IoT or whatever the hell you want to do. But you need something to excite you and keep you going, right?
Yeah, exactly. 100%. So I think we're almost at the end of the interview. You told me you have a bunch of questions that you wanted to ask. Do you want to chat about those?
Sure, yeah, if we have time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
time.
So as you may have gathered by now, I've been learning full stack development, which is a huge undertaking, because web development in 2018 is nuts. It's so much. It is so much. even just front end, or even just back end, or even just DevOps. It's just all nuts, right? So one thing I've heard more and more, you know, poking around on the internet, is this idea that full stack development is some kind of illusion or delusion or mistake, and that realistically you should only focus on one or the other. You should focus on being an expert in the back end or focus on being an expert in the front end, because otherwise the metaphor I heard was that if you try to be full stack, you're going to end up like some kind of Renault guy who does shitty tiling and also shitty plumbing and also shitty electrical, but he's not good at any of those things.
That's amazing.
What do you think about this idea?
Oh my God. Yeah, I heard about this like many times, and they told me this a lot in the past years when I wanted to be a full stack. Like whenever, like, okay, yes, I know how to do front end, I know how to do back end, I know how to do DevOps, I know like how to manage a database, I know to like all this type of stuff. And whenever I said, oh, I know also design, everyone assumed that I was like, oh, you probably like really average in everything and you're never like really specialized. First, you shouldn't do full stack as soon as you start. When you start, yes, you should focus on one thing. You should pick something. The problem is that in this day and age, you will end up doing full stack anyway, because even if you, for example, you take React, if you want to publish a website, you are going to build a React app, and then you're going to use probably Apollo to connect to GraphQL. So you're going to interact with the database, and then you're going to use Meteor if you want, and then you're going to deploy somewhere to a server. So even if you're by yourself and you want to do just front end with React, you will slightly touch upon a little bit of backend, a little bit of DevOps, a little bit of deployment, integration, and all this kind of stuff. So the more websites you do, the more projects you do, the more knowledgeable you will get in other fields that are not yours, and you will turn into a full stack developer at the end of the day, which is, it's amazing. It's good. Like, I hate having a developer, honestly, like I hate someone that I just do front end. And if I ask you, okay, can you push to Git, or like, can you activate the deployment, or like create a Travis YAML file to do a little bit of unit testing about this? No, I have no idea what that is. I just do front end. It's today, like probably up until 5 years ago, it would be okay to do it. It would be like, yes, you just front end, it's great, like separation of concerns, and you just do one thing, it's okay. Today, in this day and age, I don't think it's possible anymore. And it's fine. Yeah, you're gonna be average. Like, it took me 12 years to be good in everything that I do, but up until like 4 or 5 years ago, I was honestly really average in everything. But it's me. Like, I was so in love with programming, I was so in love with everything, that I wanted to learn everything. I wanted to know everything. Yeah. And I think it's, the more you do it, the better you will get. And it's a great skill, because whenever a new framework comes out, it doesn't matter if it's Laravel framework, it's like a Vue.js framework, or it's like React, or it's like Ruby on Rails, you have your full stack knowledge that can support you, and you will understand everything about that. Even Laravel, that it's a PHP framework, so it's mostly backend, has a massive section about front end with a Laravel mix that it's built on Webpack and can compile everything. So even the creator of PHP framework knows a shit ton about front end. And that's what you need to know today. Like, you cannot say, no, I'm just going to do one thing.
The thing that really attracted me was the ability to build your own apps, right? Like, I guess if I was only doing front end or only doing back end, I wouldn't be able to build my own stuff. And that was kind of one of my major reasons for getting into web development. Right?
Exactly. If you you can fancy yourself as a single thing, probably just a front end. If you only want to work in massive corporations, like big offices where you have 45 people in the development team, so really one person just do one thing. But in this day and age with the startups and agile development, you need to wear many hats and you need to do many things. And that's also the thing that will make your resume stand out and you'll make your resume more interesting. Oh, this guy knows also a little bit of AWS, knows how to deploy things, even if it just does front end. We're looking for a front end developer, but also knows a little bit of DevOps. This is really great, isn't it? And like an extra thing that can surpass the competition, which is, it's always useful. I will never say no, don't learn more stuff.
Right.
Like, that's not a good advice.
I think that was definitely very helpful for me in getting interviews, having full stack, even if I'm not an expert in any part of it. I think that definitely opens some doors.
Yeah, because also you can have a conversation with a backend developer or a DevOps. If a DevOps tells you, oh, can you like adapt these files in order for the deployment to be better? You know what the fuck he's talking about. It's not like, no, I just do front end. It's like you have better communication with the rest of the team because you know the topic a little bit, even if you're not an expert.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing I was going to ask about, I heard this quote by, I'm going to butcher this name, Bjorn Stropstrup or something like that. You guys would know him as the founder of C++ or the creator of C++. C++, right. Anyways, so he was saying that to be a professional developer, to call yourself a professional developer, you should know at least 2 languages. And then he said, ideally, a professional developer should be reasonably good at 3 to 7 languages, somewhere in that range. And then beyond that, it would be good if you've toyed around and played around with some other languages. But, you should be competent in at least 3 languages, he thinks, and 2 to call yourself professional. In this day and age, we're talking about how full stack is already so daunting. So for me, just learning full stack JavaScript with DevOps and with styling and CSS and all that, it's already a huge undertaking, right?
Yeah.
So what's your opinion on this, on the idea of learning multiple languages? Of course, I really do want to learn multiple languages, but it's sort of something that I've put off for now because I feel like I'm already stretching myself in a big way.
Yeah.
So what do you think for a developer in the long term? What's a good number of languages, or how do you be strategic about selecting languages?
I think Bjorn is completely wrong. Like he went out of his mind. That's insane. That's something that you probably had to do 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Just like, okay, I learn net or like I learn ASP, and then I have to learn PHP, and then I have to learn COBOL or like Pascal, or I have to learn like Visual Basic. And because 20 years ago, PHP was a really finite language. You learn PHP, done. You learn C, done. You learn C#, done. Because it's done. Like those languages are complete. PHP is still evolving now, but for 10 years, PHP wasn't updated in any version. Today, that's a really stupid argument. That doesn't make sense. Today, if you do an HTML, CSS, and JavaScript application, you can call yourself a developer.
Oh, interesting.
Being a developer is not how many languages you know, how good you are. It's just like, did you code something from scratch? Even if it's just like tables in HTML, you're an HTML developer. It's fine. You developed something, whatever. In terms of like, you should learn more languages, you should switch things, you should learn more stuff. It will come to you. It will happen. I coded my entire life like in PHP, and I used WordPress pretty much my entire life. And then I started, I didn't understand like, why do I need to learn Laravel? And then I switched to Laravel, that it's a completely different framework, but it's still based on PHP. Then I wanted to do something more extreme with the front end. So I learned a lot of JavaScript, and now I switched to JavaScript frameworks like React, Vue.js, Angular, and all these things. And then I got really into Linux development. So I learned Vala and C++, which are like crazy languages that still drive me crazy every fucking day, but because I'm passionate about it. But that didn't happen like, okay, now I know 5 languages in total, I'm really good in 3 of them, so I can probably call myself a junior developer, like a barely a developer. No, took me 15 years to be good in something, and then, oh, I want to learn something else. Okay, let's learn something else. And always, you have to always decide what is good for your career path. What is good? Like, if you really love building Node.js app, why should you learn PHP or C++. Like those don't make sense at all. If you're really into web development, don't learn Vala, don't learn C#. Those are they're just gonna clutter your mind. You, of course, learning a new language is always good because it gives you really a good technical background to learn pretty much everything. And when you keep going, almost all the languages are pretty similar, and all the languages can teach you something more, but we have a finite amount of time. You cannot, it would be amazing to learn all the languages that you want, but you don't have the time to do that. And like why you started to code? To work and make money. So pick the languages that make more sense for you. And yeah, that statement is I completely disagree with that statement. Like totally, nope.
Very interesting. I like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Because honestly, that sounded like quite the task, learning 3 to 7 languages very well, at least in the short term. Right?
It's crazy. No?
Okay, so also, if we have time, I was wondering about your opinion on Rust, because what interests me in Rust is that it's kind of considered a lower level language, comparable or maybe even potentially a replacement for C++ in some ways. But at least in Vancouver, when you look at the job advertisements, there's almost no Rust. And funnily enough, because Rust is produced by Mozilla.
Yeah.
And the only job opening for Rust in Vancouver right now is actually with Mozilla.
Right.
So yeah, so it's a language that interests me, but it seems like at the moment it's not really something that's going to pay the bills for you, at least in Vancouver. So I'm wondering about your opinion on the viability of learning Rust. And also I have heard about Rust being used as a back-end web development language. I don't know, is that completely crazy or?
Never heard about that. Rust is pretty new. I don't know of any companies here in Vancouver that are actually interested in Rust. I know a couple of companies online, like for example System76, that make the Pop! OS operating system in Linux. A lot of their front end, the installation service, when you install a new distribution of Linux, it's built on Rust. And I mostly know, like, I never coded Rust, I never used it, but I mostly know people use Rust for software like installation of operating systems. I don't know of anyone using Rust for web development actually. But yeah, it's getting a little bit of hype, and there's a lot of movement, and it's constantly updated. So I guess it's a pretty good language. But I don't know. I think it's a bit early for requirement of development. It's like, I don't know, it's like Node.js 5 years ago. It was getting there. A lot of people like, oh, this Node.js is cool, but not many jobs availability. And today everyone asks for Node.js, right?
Yeah, who knows? Maybe you're a super genius if you figure out Rust now, and then in 5 years you'll be like the only expert around. I don't know, but that's also a gamble, right?
Well, it's a gamble. That's true. And a lot of people did the same with Swift, the coding language that Apple released to build iOS apps. And everyone, like, as soon as they released, everyone jumped on board and wanted to learn like Swift to be like the most expert fucking thing ever. But now PWAs, progressive web application, are the new thing. So technologies changes so fast that if you love it, just go for it. I prefer Vala because it's more similar to PHP. I feel more comfortable, and compiles in native C++ or C, I don't remember. I prefer Vala than Rust because, like, for me it's like it was easier to learn, and Vala is not like, there's like 0 job offers about Vala, but I learned it because I love it, and it gave me a more strict and more like technical background that I probably needed. After learning Vala, I found myself coding better in PHP, which is kind of weird, but yeah, it's really up to you. But yeah, Rust, I'm curious to see where it's gonna go.
Sounds like a good project once the bill payment issue is already resolved and you have a full-time day job that's going well, and then maybe you could tinker with these other languages.
Definitely. That's what I do, like, every night. I code stupid things with languages that no one wants, for fun, because my day job provides, and I use the technologies that I love in my day jobs, and I keep evolving these technologies. But then going back, if I already know Laravel, like, I don't know, I know 90% of Laravel, I'm not going to spend the last 2 hours of my brain power to learn the rest of Laravel, because I'm going to use it tomorrow morning at work again. So I'm going to try to learn something that I've never did before, just because it's exciting.
My only other question was about WebAssembly. So you hear a lot about WebAssembly and the impact it's supposed to have on web development over the next decade or so. One of the potential impacts that I've seen discussed is that JavaScript will decline in popularity, not totally be replaced or not totally disappear, but because WebAssembly will allow people to, for example, use C# to code front ends for websites. And, you know, JavaScript, with the exception of Node, it's all about the front end, right?
Okay.
So do you see WebAssembly as a big game changer in the near future, like in the next 5 years or so? Because a lot of hype, but I've yet to see too many large scale, you know, applications of WebAssembly, I guess, at least in my own learning so far.
I have no idea. And this is like, I never used WebAssembly. I just heard about WebAssembly probably like a month ago, just like random people say, oh, you should take a look at WebAssembly. Never had the time to actually look at it. I don't know, like using lower level languages to code web. Is that a good thing?
Well, I mean, I guess the idea is that you're going to be able to make some extremely high performance apps. Like, for example, you could create a C++ video game using Unity and run it in the browser, which in the past is just, you know, impossible, right?
Yeah, in the past it was like HTML5, OpenGL, like really heavy on like computation and again hogging your RAM and CPU.
Right. So I guess the idea, is that there'll be some extreme cases where this technology could change the way that web browsers are used and actually allow those kind of very computationally demanding programs to run in the browser, right?
Yeah, definitely that could happen. I don't see it like using it like being used to actually build websites, but definitely like web application, complex web application, or like online games. That would be really, I think that would be a good solution, because yes, like with the death of Flash and everyone switching to HTML5, yes, you can build games and 3D games in HTML5, OpenGL, and JavaScript, but are really like high performance, really demanding. And our phones, even if our phones are amazing, they're not comparable to a desktop computer. So having something built in WebAssembly that can run on the browser and you can play it on your phone without destroying your CPU, definitely there's market for that. But I'm not sure, like I never used it. But yeah, that's interesting. What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I guess we'll find out. But I think I heard quite a bit of interest from I've seen quite a bit of interest from, say, the C# community, or guys that maybe aren't fans of JavaScript. Yeah. So maybe they're just sort of, because, you know, to them it's like, oh God, we don't have to learn front-end JavaScript anymore. Yes, we can just use our own C# to write user interfaces, and they get very excited about that. So, and even, what's the name of the original creator of JavaScript? Brendan, I forget. Anyways, he's the Mozilla guy behind Rust too. Yeah. But even he has said, probably because I think Mozilla is the organization that's doing the most for WebAssembly, or one of the organizations that's doing the most for WebAssembly. And even he said, and he's the creator of JavaScript, he predicts that it's going to lead to some, you know, degree of a decrease in use of JavaScript because you're going to be able to use these other languages. He doesn't think it's going to disappear. Yeah. But I guess as a JavaScript guy, it's something to keep your eye on.
Yeah, definitely. No, I don't think JavaScript is going to disappear. It's going to definitely evolve. Like the evolution that JavaScript had in the past 2 years is like mind-blowing. Right. Before ES6, JavaScript was a joke, like for every developer. Like the only valuable thing to use JavaScript in the same way was to use jQuery, which is fucking heavy. But then now with all these frameworks that are just built on JavaScript, you can definitely have like a headless server, or like a headless CMS, or a serverless website that is like fully wired to a backend or Firebase database just in JavaScript, not touching a single line of PHP, not touching a single line of whatever other backend language. Everything can be done in JavaScript. You have also, it's unbelievable what JavaScript can do recently. So it's still gonna evolve, but I don't think it will disappear. WebAssembly definitely will give the opportunity to all those like long bearded the old developers that are so stubborn and just, no, C# is the only true language, and they see JavaScript, oh, this is stupid. Right. I feel the same. Like I feel like, okay, coming from PHP on the way around and going into a lower level language, trying to learn C++ or Vala, it's like, oh my God, this is really strict and all these rules. And as soon as you change something, everything just like your CPU starts leaking shit. And it's like, it's really hard. Instead, like web development, even if you code something completely wrong, it works. Right. And it keeps running. Mm-hmm. But with this low level language, you cannot do that. Or it's perfect or it doesn't work. That's it. It's just like, or 0 or 1. It's just a binary thing.
Not very forgiving.
Yeah, but I see the beauty of that. And I see also the beauty of web development. And so I hope everything will evolve at the same time. And we're going to have like more opportunities in more different languages. I don't know. Everyone tries to... let's find the best language ever, and everyone will learn that, and everyone will jump on that, and we're just gonna build that. But it's not gonna happen. Especially when we're gonna have quantum computers.
All right, yeah.
How are you gonna interface with quantum computers?
Oh, there's
JavaScript.
Better get back to the physics textbook.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's it.
Yep,
all your
that's everything. Yeah.
That's awesome. So are you, as any developer, online in some sort of form in like social media, Twitter, Facebook, or do you want to share your stuff?
I'm a complete Luddite, so I'm not really big on social media. I have a GitHub account.
Nice.
What else do I have? I think that's pretty much. I think that's possibly I have Gmail and GitHub.
That's all you need.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah,
you should open Twitter.
I'll think about it. I mean, Twitter appeals to me, but I'm kind of addictive, and I think I'll probably spend all my time on Twitter tweeting angry political tweets or something. I don't know. But
yeah, definitely, like everyone's doing today.
Yeah. But it looks very useful, especially for the tech industry, keeping up with some of the big players.
Right? I just recently followed the creator of Vue.js, Evan Yu, and I love his tweets, and it keeps coming out with like crazy ideas before releasing like a press release. Hey, I'm gonna release this tomorrow, check it out. Like, oh my God.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's cool to keep in contact with other developers and be as nerdy as possible.
I'll probably have to change my stubborn ways at some point. Right.
Well, yeah, like every addiction, that you can find a balance, or maybe not.
Maybe not.
Destroying your career on Twitter.
Exactly.
That's it. I don't want to code, I need to tweet. Yeah. Okay, that was a fantastic episode. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for being like so forward in sharing your experience and all the advice that you gave us, and hopefully all these advice are going to be like useful for the audience.
My pleasure. I mean, it's almost as if that's all I've been doing for the past year, so I'm very
pretty much, yeah.
I'm very capable of sharing that. Yeah.
It's good to talk about things that I've been doing forever.
This is my therapy session.
That's great. We can do this every week. It's fun. It's totally cool. Okay, if you want, you can tweet at NerdContinuity, or you can leave a comment underneath these podcasts on YouTube, and you can find these podcasts pretty much everywhere on like iTunes. I'm trying to find a way to submit this podcast on like Spotify or Google Play that are not available in Canada, which I'm super pissed, and it doesn't even work with a VPN. I'm really, really upset. But that was an amazing episode. Let me know if you have any question. Leave a comment below, leave a thumbs up, or leave a review, or just if you're angry, just like shout at me. It's fine. It's going to be super awesome. Thank you so much, guys, for watching, and until the next episode, as usual, happy coding. You can say happy coding if you want.
Happy coding!
With my tone.